You write so many different things. I was, amazed when I read all that Annie writes. I mean, I haven't read it all, but when I read about her experience as a journalist, she's written poetry, she's written short stories, she's written essays, she's written plays, prize-winning plays. What do you not write, Annie?
Advertising copy.
Anyway, it's fabulous. And do you write in many languages?
Not really. I write mainly in English. I have written plays in Hindi. Somehow plays occur to me in Hindi sometimes. I hear them in my ear in Hindi. But no, I don't write in any other language.
People here will know that theatre in Goa is very alive, There is Konkani theatre. Every Saturday you open the papers and you see advertisements of theatre. And some of them have hundreds of shows. And I'm yellow with jealousy because they are so popular. There's Marathi theatre as well, and some of it is fabulous. But I want to tell you a little story. We are storytellers, you see. Once I called a computer technician to do some work on my computer, and he did the work, and on his way out, he's laughing away. So I said, what happened? Why are you laughing? I've never seen so many books in one room, he said. I said, why do you like books? I said, I'm a teacher, and I also write. You write? What do you write? I said, plays. In Hindi? He said. I said, no, in English. There is theatre in English in Goa? He couldn't believe it. And when I said yes, he was just too amazed. Sometimes, these are small-time things that we do. But when we discover that somebody else loves the same stuff that we love, then there is a connection. Now, the only reason I am sitting here is that this novel is about theatre. And so I will ask Annie to tell us something about the comeback and maybe what inspired you to write it.
So this is a novel I wrote in a very short span of time. I wrote it over one summer. And I'm in the middle of doing my PhD actually. I started it the process between COVID, just in between that. And then as soon as the second wave ended, I left to do my PhD. And I was missing theatre so much. I was missing Bombay so much. Bombay is a very vibrant, like you were saying about Goa, there's theatre in at least 4 languages that I know of, possibly more. There's English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, maybe even Konkani. I know Tamil people also do theatre there. So it's a vibrant scene. And I also know the scene because I've worked with some of those theatre companies. I've had some of my plays put on. So I know that world and I miss that world. I miss its energy. I miss the artistic things we take and give to each other, right? Every time you meet an author, you collaborate with them. You see how directors work. You see how the audition scenes work. How do they even make a living? I couldn't make a living as a playwright. I have to do 5 other things in order to write a play. I have to do 5 other things. And I know it's the same for actors and directors. Theatre is one thing they do for love. We don't do it for the money. We may or may not they may or may not break even on a show or a production. You know this, right? So we all do this because we're driven in some way. And I miss that sense of working from that place of drive, pure drive. Then in the middle of my studies, I was missing theatre so much. There was an option to teach as a teaching assistant. Instead of novels, I chose to to teach theatre, because at least that kept my connection with theatre alive. And I was thinking about this, why does it matter so much to me? Why can't I let go of this theatre thing and just focus on academics and, you know. But then in the course of thinking all these thoughts, I remembered my own college days. I've dedicated the book to the girls with whom I started making theatre, because I grew up without theatre. I grew up in a very small place. We had no live entertainment whatsoever. Once a year on New Year's Eve, one orchestra party would be called, and they would sing cheap imitations of Bollywood songs, and that's it. I saw my first live dance performance, I think, when I was already 15. The only theatre I knew was the theatre we made. We, in our small school, the teachers would help, and they would say, okay, turn Cinderella into a play, turn something else into a play. We picked up our textbooks and picked out one-act plays out of that and started performing them. And that was my training, really. And then in college, we found our own theatre group, and we started putting plays on. And for a while, I thought this would be my life. It didn't. It didn't turn out that way, but I wanted to go to NST, and it was like this little bit of a dream in my head that went nowhere. But the Kira has never gone. And I wrote this wanting to recapture who I was, who I could have been, and who I'm not. I'm most definitely not the protagonist of my book, but I could have been. If I had kept acting, say, or kept directing, it could so easily have been me, because I would have been forced to make the same compromises as the characters in my books do. So that led me to this. And for me, it was an act of great fun, and also a way of capturing some of what it takes to make theatre, to tell that story. So that's what The Comeback is about.
I suspect that a writer has a reader sitting in his or her head. When you write, perhaps you're writing for someone. A novel like this is a novel, so you're writing for a reader who will sit home and read it. And yet it is about theatre. And when you write for theatre, you write for a live audience, and you write for actors. How did this happen? Who did you write for, Annie?
I think I wrote for my friends. Primarily those 18-year-old girls who were trying to make theatre in their small town, in their college, but also for my theatre friends. I know that they will read it with a lot of fun, and they will see shades of themselves in it. They will recognize the industry patterns, because in Bombay, actors can only exist on the intersection of film, television and theatre. That's the only way that they can make a living. And the novel is also set in that way. But artistic ambition is something else. Like professional ambition is one thing, artistic ambition is something else. And every artist has to deal with that, choose sometimes between professional ambition and artistic ambition. So I have written for those friends, I think. I think they will like it, or at least they will relate to it, even if they don't like it. Yeah. Yeah.
Writing about theatre in a way involves knowing what an actor is, what a director is, what a live audience means. How did all this happen? It didn't happen overnight. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of being a novelist and also your experiences of being a theatre lover and theatre artist?
Yeah. I'm glad. Does it work? No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that one. Okay. I'm glad you used that phrase, theatre lover, because that is primarily what I am, before I am anything else. Like I am a reader before I am a writer, I'm a theatre lover before I am a playwright or anything else. but it hasn't come overnight. My experience of, along with other girls, not me alone, but a bunch of us running a theatre club in college taught me a lot. Firstly, it taught me to work with people. As a novelist, you work on your own. You can afford to antagonize a lot of people. Theatre doesn't work like that. You have to work in a team. You have to also disappoint people. When your own friends audition, suppose I'm directing a play, even if it's a student play, your own friends are lining up to audition, they want the best parts, and you're going to have to say no to your best friends. And I know what that feels like. And then I've also, as a playwright, on the professional fringes of the professional theatre scene in Bombay, I've watched when auditions happen. I've watched careers go up, go down. It gives me so much happiness even now when I see the theatre actors who in the early 20s were auditioning for my plays, and now I see them on TV and film. It gives me so much happiness. But I also see the ones who get a break and then they take a fall. Then suddenly they've disappeared after 2 years. They're not getting work anymore. They're struggling again, trying to make theatre again. So I've seen the cycles that happen. I've seen it over 20 years. The people I started out with are now middle-aged. So I see what happens to careers. And that's the novel is a response to all of that. To seeing people struggle, get old, but still be fired up with that ambition for their art.
I thought the title was very appropriate. The comeback. It's the comeback of theatre into the lives of a number of people. Is the play, is the novel entirely about the comeback of theatre, or is it also about friendship? Is it also about love? I thought this was a very pregnant kind of a title. I thought I would ask you about it.
Yeah, thanks. You're right. It is about those things. It is about coming back to your hometown. It is about bringing theatre back into your life. It's also about, I've used the word comeback in the sense that comeback also has somewhat ambiguous connotations where you want to hit back at someone and you get your own back. So it's also about getting your own back. This novel, very briefly I'll tell for those who haven't read it. This is a story of friendship, primarily one of friendship and betrayal. My protagonist is telling his own story. His name is John Kay. He's an actor called John Kay. He struggled and after 17 years he's finally got a break in film. And he gives this interview, once he gets his big break, he gives this interview where he reveals certain things about his college life that destroys the life of his best friend. And his best friend is not an actor, his best friend is a banker. And because it destroys his life, suddenly his friend has nowhere to go, doesn't have a job, doesn't have any, really, he's ashamed and humiliated publicly. And it's his best friend's name is Asghar, and about how Asghar gets back on his feet and how he gives up his friendship with John, but then how John is determined to win Asghar back as a friend and as a theatre collaborator. So that's the story, really. It's about getting your own back, but also about getting your friendship back.
No spoilers. I'm not
Not
going
yet,
to give away
no.
any secrets. But it's a novel that you can't put down. You know, I read it and I was so uplifted by theatre once again. Theatre is one of the arts, no, Annie? There are so many other arts. There's painting, there is drawing, there is singing, there's dancing. What attracts you to theatre?
Theatre is unlike anything else because it is a replicable and yet non-replicable art. A painting doesn't change depending on its context. If it starts raining here, the painting will not change color unless it's watercolor and the colors run. That's a separate matter. But you know, you take a painting to via another painting, still the painting. people can interpret it in different ways. Similarly, for a book, you read this book in Goa, somebody else will read it in Bombay. The book will be a book. A show is not like that. You do a show here in English, and if your audience is mainly, say, non-English speaking, or they don't even understand English, your play will fall flat. It won't work because you draw energy from the audience. You crack a joke, they have to laugh. They're not laughing, your joke's not working, your play's not working, right? Similarly with culture, certain things are funny in one culture, they're not funny in another culture, you know? We've seen this, we see this over and over again if you watch and make theatre, right? So you know, you derive from the audience, and even as an audience member, I love going to the theatre because if something's happening here on stage, I'm sitting next to someone. If the other person laughs, my laugh is louder. If the other person starts to suddenly shiver, if it's a terrible scene, I feel that shiver and we feed off each other. That doesn't happen in any other art. Maybe a little bit in live concerts. Like, you know, that's why people love going to rock concerts also, because you're feeding off the energy of the crowd. So I like that. And it is what makes it magical as well. It is also interesting because it's the only art you can improve. You do a show, you see what's wrong, you can fix it the next night. You can't fix a novel. It's out, it's out. So it is unique and it's human. It's so human. Everything that makes us human, our ephemerality, our flaws, our changeability, I love all of that. And I love how you can take a play, if the same character is being played by a young person or an old person, the meaning of the play changes. And I love that about it.
Do you act, Tani?
Only in college. I was a terrible actor, Isabel. You would throw me out of your place. Because, you know, I have a big problem. I can't remember dialogues. I'll learn the thing, and if you and I are in conversation on stage, I'll start watching you act. And I'm thinking Isabel is doing such a fine job, but I'm not saying the dialogue I'm supposed to say. So then I said, okay, this is not for me. Better behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by theatre because it involves so many arts. There is somebody who writes a play. There's somebody quite different who interprets it and directs it. There are actors who have to become somebody that they are not. And you talk to an actor and they will tell you that they agonize to become somebody different. There is the person who designs the lights. Somebody else designs the sets. Somebody does makeup for you. Somebody designs the costumes. And some of the things that the novel tells you are so exciting about the experiments that one of the theatre persons starts undertaking on his own comeback to life, comeback to theatre, and how he uses space in a way that is totally exciting and unexpected. Tell us something about it.
Why don't I read out that
please
section?
Do. Please
yeah?
do.
So, yeah, thank you. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find the page. I should have marked it.
No, no problem.
To get my glasses out.
We will have a question and answer session also, so please get ready with your questions.
So, my protagonist, Asghar, is gone back to his hometown called Bansa. The place is called Bansa. It's a small town in UP, fictional town. I've not based it on any real place. And Asghar is putting on a play here. It's called Banke. It's an adaptation of a Western play. He's done it in his own way. So this is John Kay coming back to watch Banke. Act 2 had been invited to Lights. Asghar hadn't even been trying to show his work in Delhi, but trusty old Professor Jha had invited himself to a rehearsal. Then he raved long and hard to anyone who would listen about the delicious blend of Eastern and Western dramatic traditions that were being forged in a Mufassil town, and what a pity it was there wasn't more support from the state, and how much of the metaphorical and literal space was being hogged by those whose only claim to artistic merit was their proximity to the literal and metaphorical seats of power. Eventually, grassroots KP was alerted. KP was still annoyed at Asghar for turning down his offer of a visiting fellowship at the academy, but he was also on the board of advisors for the Lights Festival of Drama. He made some calls to sponsors and rustled up a travel budget so that Banke could travel to enter the competition. Asghar thanked him nicely, but first, he insisted, KP should come to Basa and watch a full dress rehearsal. Only then would Act 2 accept any money. I want you to experience the play the way it is meant to be experienced. At the actual grassroots, you will be our guest and it will be an honor, he said. Intrigued, KP accepted and drove up from Delhi along with a couple of his colleagues at the academy. In Basa, they were welcomed with crisp samosas and jalebis, and then they were made to wait until sundown. The chosen venue for Banke was not the Apsara cinema but a wedding hall that occasionally hosted ghazal nights. Asghar's adaptation of The Masquerade meant that the audience would be thrown smack into the drama of a typical North Indian wedding that sprawls over 3 days, starting with the Mehndi night and ending with the reception. He didn't even have to build a set or buy props. He used the same stage where brides and grooms usually sat, on 4 velvet chairs, waiting to accept gifts and be photographed against flowery backdrops. Silk fabric screens were dropped to suggest homes and rooms. A musical band was handy. Veils and flowery sehras served the same purpose that masks had done in the original text. There was even a proper romantic caper, full of color, chaos, and a singing, dancing courtesan. Before he had even finished watching the second act, Grassroots KP had offered to double the budget. You must do it exactly like this in Delhi, he kept saying. Exactly like this. Do not compromise on anything. 3 days later, Banke opened to a full house in Basa, with tickets going at 500 rupees each, inclusive of snacks. The audience had been encouraged to dress up as if they were guests at a wedding. Samosas and sweets, frothy cups of coffee were served during the 10-minute interval. The crowd never stopped laughing, and on popular demand, an extra show was scheduled midweek.
It's almost as if the location is a character. It influences whatever happens. The actors are touched by the space that they occupy. I don't know whether the actors in turn affect the space. They certainly affect the audience. Would you like to say something about your other forms of writing? Because you are a short story writer, you are an essayist, you have written for television and film. Is it different from writing a novel?
I haven't really written for television successfully. I kept trying, that never happened. So far at least it has not happened. I have written short films and I have made a documentary, but that's sort of independent venture. It is different, it's very different. I think a novel, you are in complete control of a novel, more or less. I mean, if somebody agrees to publish it as it is, then it's your thing. It's completely your thing. With essays, to some degree that can be true, but you are dependent on somebody commissioning an essay, somebody agreeing to publish it in a newspaper or magazine. It's very rare nowadays for you to just write whatever you want to write. You're responding to events. So say something has happened and you write an essay about it and things. And you're limited by length. You can't go on and on and on in an essay. At some point it stops being an essay and turns into something else. I write instinctively, but I think I'm very rarely in control of what I'm writing. Like when I started this, it's not like I decided I would write a novel. It was just that I feel like writing something. Let's begin and see where it goes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I want to ask you a question. Just taking off from what I read before. I know that you do theatre in Goa, and I know you also play a lot with space, and that the needs of space and culture determine the kind of work you do. Why don't you tell me how you do that? How you make those decisions?
We are small time actually. I'm a member of a theatre group for very many years. This is our 38th year. And we do plays regularly. So when we began, we were quite orthodox. We would go and hire a hall, maybe in some Kala Academy or Institute Menezes Braganza, and all it left us with was a hole in the pocket. But then, as time went, we became more experimental. So we have performed here, there, elsewhere. We have gone to Perne and staged a play on the terrace of a school. We have gone to Dona Paula, to the jetty, and performed at 3 or 4 different levels with a live band playing for us. We have gone to the riverfront and done a small play and dramatized a poem of somebody who is on a wheelchair. What have we not done really? Now recently what we do is we go to the houses of people. An NGO invited us and we went, and the most exciting thing is that each of these venues gives you a different audience and a different reaction. So we've gone, the last play but one, we wrote about somebody whose statue is in a garden in Panjim, Francisque Luis Gomes, that people look at and know nothing about. So we wrote a little play called Anybody Home? By the way, this man's home is now in dust and ruins. So we staged the play in the village that he was from, in a college which is in the neighborhood. So there are no limits now. We go just anywhere. We have to know in advance, obviously, what kind of venue we are staging the play in, because the two are very deeply interconnected. So anything is open to us now, and it's more exciting this way. If you become very orthodox, you have to rent a hall, and according to their timings, sometimes they give us from 3 to 6 and then from 8 to 11. Absolutely unsuitable for us. So very easy, you book for 2 shows. 2 shows. That means double the cost. So now we've become clever. In our old age now, we do what we do because we want to do it, and we do it anywhere that it strikes us.
So see, this event was kind of fated because you are my Asghar Abbas. Effectively, yes, because this is exactly what Asghar does. He looks at the place, he looks at the town, he said, I'm going to work with what this town has. And so fantastic. I'm so glad that you are the person who is then in conversation about this.
And sometimes even the weather becomes an actor. At one point we were doing a play called Katore Baji, which was in English, by the way, about a great Goan who was perhaps one of the first global citizens, Abe Faria. Again, there's a statue in the middle of Panjim, and a few people know about him, but not very many. So we were staging this place. It was a mini open air auditorium, and the play was being staged in December. And it started raining. And we are there all ready, and we don't know what to do now. Is the audience going to get up and just go? But they didn't. In fact, they said to us, "Why don't you start?" And the actors said, "Come on, let's do it." And they came, you know. Although it was raining, they started, and the rains were taught a lesson. They vanished. And our play went off pretty well. And this is a story that we remember.
It's an amazing story. And I think, one of the impulses that drove me to write this novel also is knowing that it's difficult. Making theatre is physically difficult. It is demanding on you. You have to be fit firstly in order to whatever. Like at one point John Kay is asked to lose 5 kilos because he has to be able to climb and do ropes and things like that. And theatre artists are expected to do those things. And you can't afford to, it's not like films where you can do a cut and then an extra will come and do something for you. It's not like that. You are the thing, you are the whole thing. So you have to be able to inhabit the body that is necessary for the play. But you also have to be able to inhabit, if you don't mind, I'll read a very short section from towards the end.
Of course.
Which is John Kay trying to give an audition after all the shenanigans he's done. So this is after a lot of manipulation. John Kay is a bit of a manipulative guy. A lot of manipulation. He somehow managed to engineer things so that the play he wants to be in comes together. He knows the play is happening, but how to get himself cast in the play, that he cannot guarantee. So he has to go and audition for this friend who will not talk to him. So this is from the section that he goes and does the audition for. So remember, he's already a movie star, and to go to a small place and then audition, it's a bit of a ego hit for him, but he does it. And here is the section. One by one, they did their songs, their beats, their introductions. All eyes were on Asghar, searching for the tiniest spark of approval. But for a change, I found myself focused on the other actors. Name upon name, song upon song, flutes and bongos and doles. One girl asked if she could show some dance moves instead of music. Another man said that he had learnt Kalaripayattu, and he was willing to teach the other actors his martial skills if he was picked. A jowly youth in a checked shirt was poring over a book, perhaps the text of the play. That was how I must have looked 19 years ago. Too thin arms, jeans that never really fit, sleeves rolled up to my elbows in an attempt to look as if I was serious enough. But failing this thing, I could walk away unscathed. During the break, Mullan paused before me with a tray loaded with cups of tea. Our eyes met. Her eyes told me she recognized me, that she was weighing me in the balance, and she wasn't exactly rooting for me. There would be rivals in New York too, tall, strapping young men who could sing and dance and play 5 instruments while turning somersaults backwards. I drained my cup of tea and wished there was more, though my teeth were furry and my muscles were clamped with anxiety. Dare I go ask for another cup? No, it may seem as if I were asserting a right to something that wasn't yet mine. But my heart protested. It is mine by rights. I made this audition happen. The very existence of Act 2, Asghar's determination to make drama, his fierce rejection of the kind of ambition that made actors lose their conscience, it was all my doing. But now I was going to show him. I wasn't a mere climber or a creeper, a fluke or a flake. I'd show him. I was more than what he imagined. When my name was called out, I sensed a little frisson at the back of the room, followed by a hush. At least some of them knew who I was. I moved to the front of the room to face a little committee made up of Asghar, Shanti, and Chiku. I met their eyes in turn, smiled a small smile, cleared my throat. Just then something distracted me, a tinkle, a jangle, anklets, bangles. I didn't want to turn around to check whether it was real or just my mind playing tricks. I shut my eyes and took a deep breath to transport myself back to the concrete platform in a quadrangle outside a college building. Asghar, my best friend, sitting on his heels, laughing. I had failed to do a full cartwheel. Once he was done laughing, he had chided me. Why do you even want to do the cartwheel? Is the character a cartwheel or is he a man? I opened my eyes and began to introduce myself. My name is John Kazim. John K is my screen name. I'm turning 40 later this month. I live in Mumbai, but I grew up in Basa. I've acted in a couple of films, a few TV shows, a few stage productions too, but to be honest, I've done more lighting work than acting. Santi smiled encouragingly. The silence deepened. I thought I heard a rustle of organza behind me. Was I really losing my mind? A familiar voice, a whisper, scratching of pen and paper. No, I wasn't imagining it. Nazo must be here, putting her name down on the list. Rustle, rustle, tinkling bangles. Wondered if she was wearing a courtesan look again. Someone cleared his throat. I looked up and found Asghar staring at me. For a moment, I had forgotten what I was there for. Asghar cleared his throat again. Are you going to show us something? Do you have any musical ability? These were the first words he had addressed directly to me in 3.5 years. I could feel him chafing under my gaze. He wanted me to look away, to focus on someone else. Did he want me to fail? No, that wasn't it. He wanted something else. I'll stop here. You can find out the outcome of the audition when you read the book.
So beautiful, so beautiful. We have a little time. Would anybody like to ask questions? There are so many students. I'm sure some of you have experience of theatre and some of you have experience of writing novels or short stories. Please do ask.
There's a girl here. She wants to.
Hello, ma'am. So, as a writer, what would you like to tell young minds who would like to write in the future? What keeps you inspired, like throughout the journey? Because there are so many times when you start writing and then you lose touch with your own writing. What keeps you inspired? Especially when you're writing about something so complicated like theatre.
I think the need to make a living is a great motivator. Mostly that is my primary motivation for the last 20 years. For this novel though, that wasn't my motivation. This I think was I was just driven, like I said, I was missing theatre so badly. I wasn't writing new plays, I wasn't able to even watch plays, at least not in my own culture and context. And yes, I will say this. I think recently, this is the first time in my life that I've lived away from the country for more than a couple of months, and I think in the first year of my PhD was the first time I realized how much I missed the art scene back home. It wasn't just my friends. It's when you are making and watching theatre from within your own culture, the impact it has on you and the way you relate to it is so different, so much stronger. I was missing that. I can watch British theatre, American theatre, I can enjoy it, but what my theatre scene says in my language, and when I see people like me understanding the jokes, responding to it, that feeling, you know. I think that maybe made me think about what would it be like to go back to your hometown and set up a theatre company there. So I let my mind go wild then.
If I could suggest, if it's a student who wants to be
Ma'am?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, ma'am, Annie, I would like to ask you, as a woman writer, what influenced your decision to choose a male protagonist? Did you ever consider having a female protagonist? Or was there a specific reason you thought a male protagonist would be more fitting for the story?
I don't know why. It could be because I think because, you know, when I listen to a lot of podcasts and interviews with mostly with other writers, I have to confess, but sometimes with others also, like actors and whatever. And I've noticed a difference in the kind of interviews they give. The trigger for this story is this is an interview gone wrong, right? He gives an interview, he says too much. And I've noticed the slight difference in the public persona that male artists put out and female artists put out. Female artists will very rarely brag about mistakes made. If they've done something wrong with their friends, they will very rarely go out and boast about it in public. And I think men tend to do a bit of that. It adds to their swagger, their public, the little glow around who a person is. It's okay to be a bad boy, you know. Or to be no longer a bad boy, but talk about, you know, in our young days we used to go out and do this and we used to go out and do that. I've noticed that girls very rarely do that. There is, of course, some sense of need to protect yourself, but at least in our culture and country, there is also this awareness of the consequences for themselves or for other people. And I think maybe that was what, it wouldn't work. Instinctively, I knew it won't work with a female protagonist because a woman would probably be forced to think about the consequences of what she's doing.
Hello. There is one question that I would like to answer. You asked Annie, what needs to be done to become a writer? Right. It doesn't happen. It
Of
doesn't
course.
fall.
I
like-
agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just write whatever you enjoy writing. In college, there is some program that's going to happen. Write for it. You can write a dialogue, you can write a little scene, you can write a short story and narrate it. Just write.
I back that up. Even if you don't do it, even if you don't do it for a living, even if you have other jobs, etc., the discipline of writing has to be there. I agree with Isabel there.
And it's exciting. It's not some boring stuff that you sit there to torture yourself with. You write it because it's exciting. And if you read it out to somebody, to a friend maybe, or a sibling or somebody, you get feedback and it's good. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, please.
Hello. A question to both. Who are your favorite playwrights or theatrists? And to ma'am, since you have written so much, you have written essays, plays, and even a book now, I just want to ask, how do you cope with the writer's block? As you have encouraged us to write, and so I write, but sometimes I'm faced with the writer's block, as they say. So how do you cope with that?
I don't think Annie suffers from writer's block.
You asked me that, yeah. I do sometimes, but because I write across form and because I used to be a journalist, like full time and then part time, and then, so I think the necessity of writing, like if when you have a deadline, there's no point saying I have a writer's block, right? Your editor is waiting at 5 p.m. for a copy, so whatever you churn out, it may be a bad first draft, but the information has to go on the page. So I think for non-fiction work, you can work like that. For fiction, yes, sometimes that happens, but I switch genre sometimes. If I'm feeling very blocked, say I'm trying to write a story, it's not turning out the way I want, I stop writing it, I go off and write something else. I'll write a poem. If the poem's not working, I drop that. I say, let's try and write a play. Sometimes that's also not working. then I give up and I read, or I write on Twitter or something like that. But yeah, there's ways around it. Or you can set yourself exercises. The play that I did win a prize for example, Untitled One, I was blocked. There was this competition. I wanted to write a play to enter the competition. I wrote one scene and then I was blocked. It wasn't working. And I kept trying to, what if my character does this? What if my character does that? But somehow there was something in it that was stopping me. So I did this exercise, and I would encourage you all to try this exercise. It actually works, speed writing. Throw away the draft, take pen and paper and start writing, stream of consciousness. That's how I started writing. It turned out to be a completely different play. It wasn't the play that I wanted to write, but it was the play I needed to write. You know, if you stop trying so hard, sometimes the thing that needs to get out will get out. So you need to try that sometimes also. And about favorite playwrights, I mean, you can tell yours. I actually have read not enough, but I have read mostly only in Hindi and English. So Girish Karnad is one of my favorites amongst the contemporaries. I like him a lot. I also like Tendulkar, Vijay Tendulkar. I've read his works in translation. Little bit Mohan Rakesh as well. I haven't read a lot more. Manjula Padmanabhan. Amongst contemporary playwrights, Harvest and Lights Out are some of my favorite texts. Yeah.
Can I be bold and stupid and say Shakespeare? And that is, I am stupid and I like wearing brooches. So this brooch says, where there's a will, there's a play. I don't remember really, because I have been a teacher for so long, but I must confess to you that being a teacher and being a theatre person have woven one into the other and have made my life extremely happy. Really, Gautami, it has been, because in the class I would tell stories because that's who I am. And also because some of the theatre techniques that you pick up become part of you. And so that becomes who you are as a teacher. At the same time, you gain a little confidence as a teacher because you're facing an audience, and sometimes a naughty one. But then when you learn to handle that, then you say, hey, writing a play would be good, no? And then when you direct a play, you tell your actors what perhaps they need to do to become a character. You are not just you are another character. And some of that you learn as a teacher, because a teacher has to listen. Anyway, I'm sorry if I've spoken too long. Any other questions? Anybody would like to say something?
May I add a question? I was wondering, considering how prolific both of you are, how do you write? Like, do you wake up every morning and say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words? Or do you get inspired and write 10,000 words? Or, as you said, do you face a deadline and say, okay, let me get down to it? I mean, to me, that's the most interesting question that I want to ask all the writers, really.
Would you like to answer that?
You speak first.
Okay. Because I started out in journalism, I think even in college I did write, but I think back in the day, because I also lived in a hostel that was very strict. I went to a convent as an undergraduate, and it was very strict. We weren't even allowed plug points in our room. So reading was the only entertainment, and writing was the only thing I could kind of occupy my mind with. So I think initially it was just fun, self-expression. I wrote a lot of letters, some poetry. But that wasn't a conscious discipline. I think I just did it because, why not? But afterwards in journalism, once I became a reporter, there was no choice. You had to write every day for the paper. And then when I went freelance, I made a promise to myself, because I took 1 year off from working full time. I had my first book deal and I said, okay, so are you now going to be a writer? And now that there's no office discipline, how are you going to do this? So I made a promise to myself, even if I'm doing part-time work, even if I'm doing, going out somewhere for whatever, I will come back, even if it's 2 o'clock in the night. I made myself sit down and write a paragraph. It doesn't matter what time. I forced myself to do it. I was working very long hours in those days. I forced myself to do it. And when I quit my job fully, initially riding on that high, I was writing, I said I'll work 8 hours a day. So 8 hours didn't happen, but yeah, I was writing 6 hours a day in those days. I was working on 3 or 4 projects simultaneously, but that I couldn't sustain that level. That has tapered off now. But now it's also become a habit. So I do write a little every day. I think about 500 words is my average. Some days more, some days less, but yes, I do write a little every day.
Gautami, it works for me, the fact that I am a member of a little theatre group. So they keep asking, what's the next play? When are we doing it? When are the rehearsals starting? So there's nothing I can do short of hiding under my chair. So I look for a theme. Sometimes the theme hits me in the face. One was, for instance, when they didn't supply water to my house. For 5 days I had no water. And I could see these tankers going around selling water. And I began to think about Goa and the water issue. And it is not a joke. I'm very serious about this. So we wrote a play, and the play was called Who Stole the Water? And how people make money out of other people's misery. So this is just one instance. But once I decide what I'm going to write about, then I begin writing longhand. And once it starts flowing, then I write every day, not for hours and hours because I suffer from a bad back, but I do write. And my friends help with all their questions. So when's the next rehearsal? So when are we starting? It works quite well for me.
Yeah, so you see, write every day. Discipline.
Discipline. Yeah. I would like to ask just one small question. Can you share with us something about your experience of being published?
This book, or I've written multiple books, but so the first book deal is the hardest to get. The first book I was trying to put together was poetry, very small poems, and nobody wanted to publish it, and I reached out to people and heard no. Hard no most places. Finally, I worked with an artist friend. She did illustrations, I did the poems. We did it's that size. I approached a publisher in Bombay, Jaico. They were a little reluctant to touch poetry, but I said the work's already done, the design is done, the art is done. You just have to put it out. And so they agreed.
This is a beautiful book. The way you look through it, it's really beautiful.
Thank you. So that was the first, but I have to say, people keep saying poetry doesn't sell, poetry doesn't sell. That little book, over 10 years, slowly sold. It's sold out, it's out of print. It does sell, but it sells very, very, very slowly. The second book came via a book deal, that was journalism. I was writing a lot of journalism, somebody noticed, they said, you write well, will you do a book of non-fiction? I said yes. I had no idea what I was doing the book about, but I said yes first. When it offers you a book deal, you take it. That was my first, you can say, mainstream book length book that was put out there. It was a new imprint, which is useful because when it's a new imprint, they're looking for new authors, so they will do what they can for the book. That worked in my favor. After that, I've published a lot with different publishers, moving for different reasons between publishers. This one is Aleph, but I have published with HarperCollins India, I have published with Zuban India, I have published with Westland, etc. So yeah, I think once you get your first book-length book out, publishers sit up and take notice, and that is not difficult. But the first one is hard, and poetry and plays are always going to be hard. It doesn't matter, I can put 10 books out. If the 11th is poetry, nobody will touch it. So,
Anyway, hearty congratulations.
thank you.
I'm so happy to have read this book, and I wish you all the best for the next
Thank you so much, Isabel.
one book and many other books. Thank you.
And thank all of you for being here.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Annie. I think a very lively session. So though it was post-lunch, there's been active participation, I can see. The book is available outside at Broadway. The next session starts in 5 minutes, and we're having more lively conversations, so do come back.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Isabel. Thank you.
Really lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now Isabel needs to get back.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to talk about Arthur Miller and all my sons and the
One more picture.
Oh,
Annie.
yes, now.
Annie, one more picture, please.
Yes, thank you.
No, that's small time.
Is it possible for you to come over here?
Yes.
Sorry for the Just here, just here.
Up or down?
This is for live stream. Just flip it on the this direction towards the top.
And give me some warning when you're actually holding up the book, we have to call in the photographer.
Okay. I didn't know they are whole. Okay. And someone's supposed to launch the book?
Both of you will launch it.
Okay.
I will take the
How do we launch? That I know nothing of. What is the process of launching?
I thought somebody was just going to talk in the beginning and say like,
We're launching this. Woohoo! I don't know.
I'll say.
No, I'll just give it to you after.
Yeah.
I'll say. I'll say thank you
Cut the
to,
ribbon.
to Vivek for giving me this opportunity to bring this, to have this launch in India.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming back. If anybody would like to move up front, there is place. Okay. We are on to our next exclusive book launch. And we'll hear more about the writing life. So we have this session titled Trading Secrets About the Writing Life. Shabnam Khan and Shubhangi Swaroop, and they will launch the book The Jinn Waits 100 Years, right? So I'm going to do a very brief introduction, and I will ask both of them to please introduce themselves in more detail.
Yeah.
Shabnam Khan is an author and artist based in Durban. Her acclaimed debut novel, Onion Tears, was shortlisted for the Penguin Prize for African Writing and the University of Johannesburg Debut Fiction Prize. Her quirky essay collection, How I Accidentally Became a Global Stock Photo, was published in South Africa and India in 2021. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times, HuffPost, Opera Magazine, the Sunday Times, Marie Claire, and elsewhere. In conversation with her is Shubhangi Swaroop, whom I welcome back to GALF.
Yes.
She is an Indian author, journalist, and educator, best known for her novel Latitudes of Longing, which was published by HarperCollins, and has been a bestseller both in India and Sweden. Over to both of you. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, folks. So, Shabnam and I first met in Nairobi a few months ago at the Macondo Literature Festival, and I feel honored and lucky to be in conversation with her here in Goa. I live in Goa now, so welcome, Shabnam. You've come a very long way to be here.
I mean, thank you so much, Shubhangi, for welcoming me here. I'm very excited to be in Goa. And also, this is, I have to thank Vivek also for inviting me to bring this book here, because I don't really have an audience in India, so it's exciting to be here and to introduce this book. And the same for Rahul Jain, who invited me to the Dibrugarh Festival. That's why I'm in India. And so I'm excited to bring this book to readers in India.
Well, you know, there are some books that we promote for the sake of promoting, but I have read this book and I really enjoyed it. So I would encourage anyone leaning towards reading a book that they cannot, you know, get away from. And if you're having a lull in reading, then this is a great, way to get back into it. I have 2 children, so it takes a lot if I have a book that I have to get back to and finish in 3 days, you know. I mean, not out of compulsion, but because I want to know what happens next. The language is beautiful. I have only good things to say, I would say. But I would like to begin with, you know, the end of your book, which is acknowledgements, and you acknowledge your elder sister. May I please ask you to read that acknowledgement? Because when we met in Nairobi, I came to the festival with my older sister, who is also my first editor, and like all sisters, very encouraging and a teacher mixed into one, you know, with my writing. And Shabnam took a picture of us and she wanted to send it to her sister, because her older sister is also I would say, fundamentally linked to your career and your work. So I would like to celebrate the sisterhood that brings us both to the page.
And I mean, also just to say, Shvangi, that I really love her book, and I feel like her book and my book speak to each another. If you've read her book, Latitudes of Longing, and I mean, she's one of your Goan authors, so I'm sure you're more familiar with her work. I just feel like our two novels are speaking to each another, and then we both have sisters who we love, so I feel like I'm having the conversation with the best person for this book, and I feel lucky. And also to say, if I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, it is only because I can't lean back. So if I look like I'm uncomfortable, I'm very comfortable on the edge of the seat because I have some back issues. So no one has ever asked
One of the professional hazards of writing, right? Bad back and poor eyesight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no one has ever asked me to read from the acknowledgements before. But just for the part thanking my older sister, I say, I thank everybody, and then towards the end I say, Zaida, the best big sister, thank you for being my first reader, my ardent supporter, the one who holds me together. If you were not busy trying to help every person you meet, if you were not as selfless as you are, I know you would have written your own novel by now. This is your book as much as it is mine.
Exactly, right?
Well, because she's that kind of person, and I love. I think one of the best things my parents ever gave me was a sister. Yeah.
How sweet. And gave all of us too, because our writing relies on our sisters so much. I have two sisters. One edits my work, the other one babysits my kids. So, I mean, without sisters, I wouldn't be able to focus on anything. And a mother who is a poet, so that helps. So, Shabnam, you've written 3 books, 2 of which are fiction and one is a memoir. Could you tell us a little about your writing journey and how it brought you to the gin?
So I live in South Africa. I was born there. My grandfather came there when he was 12, like in the 1930s. There's a whole concentration of Indians in South Africa, one of the biggest concentrations of Indians outside of India in South Africa, and we've been there for like 150 years now. Wow. So for me, that was the only way I knew Indian people. And so when I started writing my novel, I mean, it was obvious to me that I would be writing about 3 generations of Indian Muslims living in South Africa. It's about these 3 women. And so when I was doing a master's in creative writing, that's what I wrote my novel about. And it was subsequently shortlisted for this Penguin Prize for African Writing. The second book then is completely different. That was a family drama about 3 generations. This one is more like a travel memoir about me traveling the world, seeing what was beyond South Africa, traveling to India, traveling to China, the US, and about these very strange experiences that I have, including how I accidentally became a stock photo, which is the name of the book. And this now, The Gin Waits 100 Years, is the first time I've been published internationally. So those books came out in South Africa. This is the first time I've been published in the US and the UK. And this is a Gothic novel about a young girl who moves into a forgotten mansion in South Africa, in Durban on the East Coast where I am. Durban is very similar to Goa actually. This heat and this humidity is something I recognize very easily. It's got the same feel, the same texture. I feel like I know this place. It's very green, tropical. And so this young girl moves into this old ruined house along the sea in Durban, and she discovers that a tragedy has happened here 100 years ago, and this place is haunted by a jinn and something else. And she decides to find out what happened here, and then she finds out 100 years ago there was a couple that came from India who came and moved and built this huge house. And then something happened in this house, and the house was abandoned. And so that's what the novel is about, her trying to understand it, but also understand what love is, what grief is, and how do you find belonging wherever you are.
Would you like to read a passage?
I'll read the passage about the heat in Durban just because it's so hot here. I just want to know, I just want to show you that I recognize the place. I mean, this is more or less how the book starts off, because I also wanted to have a scene where we know this is now the global south. It is, you know, I always grew up reading books where winter was, where December, Christmas time was winter, and it was snowing and everything was snowing and it was cold, and that was what I thought Christmas was supposed to be, you know. And so I made it very clear that no, Christmas can be boiling hot in some places, you know. So no one in Durban remembers a Christmas as hot as this. The heat is a living, breathing thing that climbs through windows and creeps into kitchens. It follows people to work and at queues in the bank and on trains home. It crouches in bedrooms, growing restless until at night, in fury, it throttles those sleeping, leaving them gasping for breath. It sweeps through the streets and bursts open pipes, smashes open green guavas and splits apart driveways. It burns off fingerprints and scorches hair and makes people forget what they are doing and where they are going, so that they wander around beating their heads. At the taxi rank in town, people wave newspapers under their arms and wipe their foreheads with pamphlets that promise to bring back lost lovers. Witch doctors' phone numbers drip down their temples and into their pockets in inky blue puddles. Bananas blacken in the sun on pavement tables. The humidity grows and strangers are drawn to one another without meaning to, and they cling together in a sweaty, unhappy mess. Out in the suburbs, people sit in their inflatable pools with party hats and sip cheap wine from plastic cups. They eat bunches of lychees and hunks of watermelon and burn meat black on the braai. Maidless madams push hair out of their eyes as they hang up washing and count down the days to the end of the holidays. Dirty dishes pile up in sinks, garbage bags burst open with maggots. At the coast, the sky opens wide and burns the sea white. Little children in multicolored swimsuits skip across the hot sand and shriek in thrilled agony. Families with pots of biryani and lukewarm coke sit under small umbrellas, fanning themselves with Tupperware lids as they dish rice onto paper plates. The pier stretches on to eternity like a foreboding finger.
As you can see, her writing is very sensory, and that's what I love the most about it, you know. Of course, the story is compelling, but the language is so beautiful, the way she describes cooking, smells, so many things. Your book has different titles in different cultures, and we have spoken about how the possible usage of jinn on your title would keep readers away in Africa, but has drawn readers to the book in the West. So could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so in South Africa, this book is actually called The Lost Love of Akbar Manzil, but elsewhere it's called The Jinn Waits 100 Years. And in South Africa, we took the decision, the publisher and I, that South Africans, and maybe Africans in general, are very spiritual, and the title with the word jinn in it may deter them from buying the book, which I think was the correct decision, because when I did readings afterwards, people did tell me, yeah, I wouldn't have bought the book if you had the original title. But yet in the US and the UK, and I think in India it's pretty common to have the word jinn in the title as well. Well, there are some books. So in the US, they wanted the title with the word jinn in it to draw readers to the story. So it just, I think when you're comparing where you're going to sell the book, it depends on what the title will be, and it's very interesting because it speaks to what that audience wants.
True. Yes, I could go on about various cultures and their receptions, but I want to know more from you about straddling these two cultures, and especially the culture of storytelling that you have inherited from both the continents. And you dedicate this book to your grandfather. And when we were speaking, you spoke about how his stories have inspired you to write, which really rings true because, I don't know, when I read about this prototypical writer, there are people who've gone to libraries and been inspired by Shakespeare and Premchand and all. But to be honest, I have been inspired by my mother's stories that she bribed me to eat food with and go to sleep with. So I found it really beautiful that you've also, you're at least acknowledging the inheritance we have of these
Yeah,
what do you call
I think
ordinary
that's,
stories, daily stories.
and I think that's important because often those kind of stories that your mother was telling you and my grandfather was telling me were oral stories.
Yes.
So they get lost very easily. If it's oral storytelling does get lost, and so I think.
And it's spontaneous also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then it's a way of us trying to capture that magic of that moment that
True.
could easily slip. I mean, for all of us, whatever stories we've heard, especially if people were telling it orally, you lose it at some point. And so I think in a way we're trying to capture it again,
Yes.
the magic of that.
Yeah.
And so I dedicated the book to my grandfather because he used to tell us stories when we were small. He would gather all his grandchildren around him and tell us how he came on the ship from India in 1935. He came on the SS Taklewa and he came over the ocean and the journey, and his mother and him were in the bottom, in the third class, how they would feed them on the ship. And he would talk about when he came to South Africa, he saw light. He didn't have electricity in his village in Gujarat at that time, but when he came to South Africa, he saw electricity and he saw water running from the taps, and he immediately had to put his mouth to the tap to drink because he got such a shock to see water running from taps. And he would tell us folk tales and tales from the Quran and from the prophets and what they did. And I think as a young child, it really sparked my imagination to what the world was out there. And I didn't come from a family where reading was, encouraged, or at least we weren't a reading culture. The reason why I started reading so much was because my sister, my eldest sister, who I mentioned again, would take me to the library, the local library, and we would go and we'd just borrow a whole lot of books. I couldn't even read at the time. She would borrow for me and she would read them to me at night.
Wow.
And I remember her going to sleep really early, and I would be like, I don't know what happened in the rest of the story. And I remember very vividly, I must have been only 4, looking at all these squiggles on the page thinking, how can I make sense of them? I just want to know what happens next in the story. And I'm staring at these squiggles. I'm trying to conjure what do they mean, how can I make sense of these black lines on the page? And so really it was them who inspired me to start telling stories and to understand that the world was so much bigger than my little suburb in my little city in South Africa, and inspired that thirst to go out there. And look here, I'm sitting in Goa talking to people, and that was when as a child, that was something I dreamed of, going beyond to see what the world was about.
Yeah, I mean, so much of storytelling comes from listening, right? How good a listener are you? For me, I don't consider myself well read, but I'm very interested in just stories all around us. And I feel like we give this sacred, we give a very sacred importance to a book, and sometimes we forget to also give that to the people, the rocks, the trees, everything around us, because there are always some stories, or maybe you go into a shop and there is something happening, and that kind of wonder that comes into everything. We were discussing that also, about how in your story, one of the narrators is a jinn and one is the house. The house is an important character and narrator in the book, and your book could survive in any genre because the story is compelling. It could have been a very realistic novel, it could have been a mystery whodunit, it could have been social realism, but you chose to make it fantastical. And how did you reach that choice?
And I really think that's a question for both of us, because in my novel, a lot of inanimate objects have feelings and thoughts. So there's older smells in the ceiling who are being annoyed by the younger smells coming up into the ceiling, and they're like, oh, these smells don't know how to behave, they don't know how to be dignified, like strange things, like the walls are listening, the walls are thinking. And in your novel, when I was reading it, I remember there was a scene where the islands were dreaming.
Yeah.
You know, the islands were dreaming and imagining if they were joined to bigger continents, and I was like, I understand this language. Like, when I get this question, how did you come to it? And I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah.
I have no answer. It just feels natural to me.
Right. And it feels a lot more artificial for me personally to write or behave realistically. You know?
Yeah,
It's
so
like-
I have no
It's
answer.
like being in a school uniform or something. Like, how can you take it out? How can you behave yourself?
Like, why wouldn't the
You know?
islands be dreaming? Why wouldn't the smells
and
be
that's
thinking?
the whole point, right? Like, surprise, you're writing something. Like, for me, I remember ghosts were never part of my book, but they are a very important part of my book eventually. But that's because I started writing in a haunted house, and I was so scared of the ghosts that they started seeping into my unconscious. And I realized eventually one way of not being scared is to humanize them and understand, you know, they also have a story, it's been tough on them, you know. You don't just like haunt people for no reason. So it became like compassionate and empathy. It's like you make friends with all the skeletons in the room and you write together. So all these, like the earthworm became a part of the story because they were all there. And
like it just
if I open myself up, then a lot of voices and interesting things come up. But to not open myself up is actually very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah. So when the islands were dreaming, I was thinking, yeah, this makes sense.
Your house is transforming.
The house is watching
And the jinn
everything.
is taking the form of the grief he feels.
Yes,
It feels.
So
sorry.
the jinn is grieving for a woman, and when the jinn starts grieving for her and missing her and longing for her, it starts appearing as the woman. So its face starts changing, its hands, it grows hair, it grows nails. And that is because I feel in life, when you are grieving something so much and you lose yourself into it, you almost turn into the actual grief. And so the jinn is a representation of that.
You also said how in the Quran the jinn is an unknowable thing and you wanted to respect that mystery and smoke around it, yet you had to build a character out of it.
Yeah, so, you know, the book is called The Jinn Waits 100 Years, and there is a character, a jinn, in the novel, but it was important to me that I clarify that this is not that blue genie in the West that you rub the lamp and you get the wishes, because that's completely different actually from the original where the Quran mentions the jinn, and it mentions the jinn as the only clear things that are clear in the Quran is that it is made out of fire and it is invisible to the human race. And the rest is very, you know, there's good and bad and they'll have their own day of judgment. But the rest is not given much information, and the rest I feel like humans have put in their own things about it. Gets in through your hair, and it likes to be by the sea, and it likes lonely places. And so I write the jinn as a very unknowable character in the book. Like, I have had people who've read the novel who are like, but we want to know more about the jinn. And for me, it went very much against what I wanted to do, which was to just write it as this thing that will never be explained to you fully. Why is it there? Why is it in love with the woman? You know, there's many unanswered questions, and I did that intentionally.
On this note, may I request you to read another passage from your book about the baby?
Oh.
So Shabnam's book is very well paced. It has a lot of suspense, which is something I find quite challenging when we want to tell a beautiful story and the language takes over. How do you keep the reader engaged? That's something she's done really well, and I have.
I mean, thank you, but I also struggle with.
I'll ask you about your drafts and editing.
Yeah,
process
there's a
after
lot of
this.
editing to build up the suspense. So in the novel, there is a man named Akbar who has a first wife, and then he marries a second wife, Meena, and he has a baby with the second wife. And the two children from the first wife have now decided they are going to take it upon themselves to sort the situation out, because they do not see her as the second wife as someone that their father should be with. And so the little boy's name is Laddu, and his sister's name is Suraya Bibi. It is Laddu who informs her that Meena Begum goes to bathe every morning after she makes the baby sleep. One such morning, the brother and sister steal into her room. They push apart the lace curtains of the crib, and Suraya Bibi lifts her 4-month-old sleeping brother. She is not exactly sure what she is going to do. Everything in the house has changed since the new woman has arrived. Her mother, who normally spends her time doting on her, is now too distracted, too consumed by something to see to her needs. Her father too, who has always been a little cool with her, is different. He seems lighter, full of life, and she, knowing it has nothing to do with her, resents it. She has the idea that if she can just get rid of the child somehow, then everything will be okay again, that somehow order will be restored in the house. While she carries the baby, she tells Laddu to place one of her china dolls in the crib. It will buy them a little time, she says. Buy them a little time for what? Asks Laddu, but she shushes him. When they leave the room and go into the passage with the baby, Laddu, his eyes wide with fear, asks, "What are we going to do now?" "Give me a second," she scowls. She looks around furtively and then motions for him to follow. She walks around the upstairs passage and, spying the door to her father's library, she quickly enters and shuts the door behind them. She searches around and then, on seeing a window ajar, she walks over and looks out to the grounds far below. She glances at the baby in her arms and then at the window. When she picks the bundle up to the ledge and holds it out, Laddu looks at her in shock. But she hesitates, drawing the blanket back towards her, and walks further into the library, looking around frantically. She has not thought this through. They dig among boxes and shelves until they reach some trunks that are packed away at the back of the room. They empty a heavy trunk of old volumes and carefully place the sleeping baby inside. They look at the tiny bundle wrapped in his blanket and watch as he breathes. "He looks so small," says Laddu. "Well, he'll grow up soon enough and then we'll be in for it," replies Suraya Bibi. "Where are his horns?" "What? You said he has horns because he's a devil baby," whispers Laddu. "You said witches have devil babies." "Oh yes, they're under there, under his skin. They'll come out soon enough." "What will happen to him here?" "I don't know, okay? I don't have all the answers," replies Suraya Bibi testily. She shuts the lid of the trunk and turns away. When she reaches the entrance of the library, she turns around to find Laddu looking down at the box. "What are you still doing there?" she hisses as she goes back to him and pulls at his arm. "Come on, before someone comes." "But where's the tail?" he asks as she drags him away. "You told me it had a tail." "The witch must have cut it off," she says as she shuts the library door.
How many years did you take to write the book?
Like 8-9 years.
So what has been, how many drafts did you go through?
And I wasn't working on it for 8-9 years. I was doing other things, but it took me that period of time.
Fair.
And so many drafts. You know, this book was such a big book. There were so many characters, so many stories going on. I was trying to do everything that I could with the story. I had like 8 characters in the past, 8 characters in the present. And thank God for editors, because the editor helped me cut down a lot. And that house that went from I always imagine it as a house that was lost in the vines, and the editor and the agent came in and helped me cut and clean until the light could shine in through the windows and people could see the rooms and we could walk through the house and we could breathe in this house. Otherwise it was just really heavy, so there was a lot of cutting down in the story.
So what is the role of an objective pair of eyes besides our own in the writing process for you?
I mean, for me it was everything. I think they saved the book. The book was not... People gave up on it very quickly in the beginning. And it took someone very special to see it and say, I remember the agent saying, "I can see a way through." And the word and the language that she even used, the way she said it even, "I can see a way," made me realize she could she could help me, because nobody wanted the book in the beginning. I had agents who were rejecting this novel, publishers who were rejecting the novel, and she said, I can see a way. And I was so into that book, I couldn't see the way out. I was drowning in it, I just didn't know how to get out. I needed someone. So for me, it was crucial that I had someone with objective eyes who could help me save it.
I think you've hit on so many important points that, first time writers may not be aware of, which is the role of rejections, agent and publisher rejections, which from anyone I've spoken to, like I would say it's the majority experience. They are like, they go on an all-time high and then you find someone. It's something like that, right? Like it gets really tough and you have to hang in there. And the role of this objective person, like I again want to draw in on my sister, because I had a similar experience too with my first chapter. So the way I like to write is the way probably people don't like to read. It was all these I love language and descriptions, and I lost people in 2 paragraphs, I think. So my sister, and I was really upset because I got a lot of rejections, and then my sister looked at it and then she was like, okay, let me edit it and help you out. And she did a fantastic job. She just, pulled the story up, and it's like a seduction game we play sometimes, right? Like, what do they want to see first? And I'm grateful to her. And those people could be in all our lives. They may be unassuming, like your sister, your brother, or your friend. So hang on to them if you identify one. And they don't always come with money, right? They don't always come with through an editor or an agent. They could be anyone sometimes.
And it has to be someone who you know well, who knows what you would want from your writing as well.
Exactly, right? That love for you also plays an important part in it. And that understanding of what your voice wants to be, not just what it is, but what it wants to be.
Yeah, the potential of what you could do.
Yes, something we spoke about earlier was also compassion, the importance of compassion in our writing.
We had a conversation by phone about this, and I was saying that I felt my writing really got elevated to a different level, or made me a better writer, was when I went through some of the worst things of my life. One of them was heartbreak. So after that happened, it shook me to my core, but it made me compassionate to other people who were going through pain, because I knew what that pain was, which I don't think I had before. I didn't feel for other people that much in a hurry, but now I do, because I've tasted that sadness, or whatever it is. And for sure after that I wrote better, because I could feel it better, and it gave me compassion in a way I never had before. And you have to have compassion if you're writing characters, because you have to understand things from other people's perspective, and that comes with compassion. And so I feel, whatever that was, whatever you go through life, it can help you become a better artistic, creative person also.
It helps if you're oversensitive also.
And if you're oversensitive also.
Yeah, you just feel an excess of emotions, it's a good place to put it in. This is something, I speak about, growing up as women do in my country. We have a lot of restrictions. I grew up reading Amitav Ghosh, whose work I love, and so many writers, and I want to write like them. And when I started to, I realized, but I can't travel like them, because being alone in, forests and other areas besides our own can be a dangerous spot. I had a lot of well-wishers saying, write about what you know, which is also a way of putting us in our place sometimes, because what if my heart desires more than that? And so when I did step out into the world on my own, and I was in all these places like Myanmar and Andamans and Ladakh and Nepal, working and doing my own thing, I felt like my vulnerability helped me attract a very different set of characters, and it just opened me up. And compassion and being open to where it takes you, and even where fear takes you, can sometimes be quite actually a therapeutic experience.
And I feel exactly the same way. I came from a very conservative family where I was told I wasn't allowed to travel. So the whole of my 20s, every time I got invited or I wanted to do something, they would be like, you're a girl, you can't travel by yourself, you can't go. And I felt like all these opportunities were going away. I was missing opportunities. And now that I can, you know, I've had a long discussion with my father. Now that I can do it, whenever I travel, I'm so in awe of everything. I'm just like, wow, this, can you imagine I'm in Goa? Can you imagine I'm here? Like, I appreciate everything, which I don't think I would have done had I not had that experience of being held back before.
Yeah, and the fears we carry also, right?
And the fears also inform the way you write.
And I have an encyclopedia of fears when I step out, so it helps. It's a good, you know, prodding process.
Yeah, you must read that stock photo book. I'm scared of everything.
That's good. Well, it makes us entertaining, I guess. I think I'm good to get on with the audience.
Yeah, if you have questions.
Yeah. Do you all have questions? I mean, our aim was this to, you know, more speak as writers and have people ask us about the craft and process of writing.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Myself Vismaya. The question was that if someone hasn't started writing yet and wants to start, so what are some of the advices you like to give?
Good. Do you have any advice? Do you want to start writing?
Yes, I want to.
So you are that someone.
I am that someone.
Okay, it's good to establish that, you know, because that means you're owning it then, the desire to write.
I mean, well, the first thing I'll say is start reading. Like, start reading everything. And my writing only improved when I got my heart broken, but also when I started reading. You know, I met a writer from Nigeria who was an amazing writer, and we were doing a festival together, and I was observing her, and she never went for the parties afterwards. She used to go to a room early, and she used to read. She used to wake up in the morning and read. She knew what the books were coming out. She was reading all the time. I learned so much from her. The moment I started copying her, my writing improved. I started taking reading seriously, not just as a hobby on the side. I started taking it as a job. And when I started taking it as a job, it became my job. Like, I can now write full time, which was not possible before. When I wrote my first novel, it was not possible for me to live on just writing alone, which I can do now, and that only happened when I took my reading very seriously. Like, I had goals about how many books I was going to read a month, how many books I was going to read a year. That move changed my whole outlook on becoming a writer. Do you want to answer the question?
No, I can have a conversation with you later. I mean, I would be interested in what is stopping you from writing. Is it the lack of an idea? Is it the lack of time? Is it the lack of, is it some kind of fear of, like, whether it would work out? What is stopping you?
Maybe because I haven't really started yet.
Okay, that's a natural fear, you know, before cycling also, before swimming. We just go with it. That's when I think a lot of kindness and compassion towards oneself also steps in. It is the first time there are natural fears, but just start it, one word after another.
Today I got the inspiration.
Okay, thank you. I find it very calming to know that writing does not kill anyone in the process. It's not like a film where 10 crores depends on it. Okay, I'm using some pages, and because I feel so bad for the pages I write on recycled paper. The one side is printed out. So there's no real damage we're doing to anyone. So that should give us the freedom to write. Yeah. Besides our own time, we're not consuming much. Wow. We can keep chatting.
Yeah.
I don't know if someone asked this or you answered this while I was out briefly, but how do you write? Do you write every day, or do you write only when inspiration strikes, or what is your writing habit or pattern? This is to both of you.
Oh, well, why don't you go for it?
I mean, I'm a very bad writer. I haven't written for a long time. I need to get back into it. But you should never write when inspiration strikes only.
Yeah.
You should always be writing every day consistently.
Then you'd be on drugs, I think. You know, if one had to always write when they were inspired, we would have to be on either alcohol or drugs. Or
Also,
something.
normally I'm inspired when I'm like watching a film or listening to a good piece of music, and I don't want to every time now just give that up and start writing.
True.
So it's for me when I was writing full time, because I haven't been writing well for the last few months, but I was just going to sit at my computer at my desk, just looking at the screen even. But as long as you sit there, something will come. As long as you sit there and you wait, something will happen. But you have to be there, and it will come. But I think waiting for inspiration doesn't work.
Yes. I used to be a very disciplined writer. For 7 years, I woke up and wrote every morning, no matter what. Even when I got married, I wrote on that day. Through everything, I wrote. In my first, like I say, my first book is a novel. My second book is a child, and my third book is a child. So my other two books have, questioned the writing process. Now it's not something I do first thing in the morning, but probably third or fourth thing. But it has also helped me get a little detached, as a first time writer. My insecurities were very high, and now I'm a little more detached because I know that life has so many aspects, and we must live all those aspects, to even reach the page sometimes.
And I just want to say, what happened now is exactly the way writing is. Like she said, like I said, even you just sit at the computer and you wait, like the lights went off, you just carried on until it came back on. And that's the way it is with writing. You just sit there until it comes, and then you carry on like nothing happened, It's true. It feels like that.
I have one question for you, since we're all asking questions. So I don't understand what a plot means. It's like my mortal enemy. Your novel is very well plotted, and I'm jealous. How did you do? Like, did the plot come before the writing? What? Like, how did it work out?
I think I'm very much a writer like you, with strong characters. I love having amazing characters that are fun to write. You're fun to get to know them, and I just put them on the page, and I see what happens with them. I didn't have much of a plot. I only, with time, kept thinking, oh, there's going to be a lion, there's going to be a
Why
gin.
not?
Why not? But then they have to fit into the story. So if I wanted a lion in the story, how is this lion going to fit into the plot? If I have a jinn, how is this jinn going to fit into the plot? And I had to, I know the story has, thankfully, a good plot, but I'm not good at it. It didn't come to me naturally. It was something I had to work really hard on and make it stronger and stronger and stronger. It's not something that comes naturally to me, and I really, next time I write a novel, I'm going to have a proper outline and a plan, like a thriller writer, and where everything happens, because I think it will save me so many years.
That's what my plan was with the second one, but it's failed again. It's just failed. The plot doesn't listen to me now. Yeah.
I just want to save some years of my life, so I hope mine will work.
Yeah. If any of you all have any opinions, or there are many writers, like does the plot come first, or the language, or the characters, and how do you put it all together?
Language comes first.
Okay. Even for me. Yeah.
But I think the ones with plot comes first, they sell better.
They do, but poetry is the heart, right? Like, there's the heart, and then the brain is the plot that says, okay, we need, my mother is a poet, and I just love, language and just sentences for what they do, but but we need to, you know, keep the reader occupied till the last page.
Well,
So-
you know, that's why this book falls into that funny spot of they didn't know whether to put it as literary or commercial, because the plot, it had the poetry and the language, but it also had the plot. So it straddled a funny spot, and that's not necessarily a good thing because they didn't know what to put it under.
So I have a question for you. I'm just curious about the title of the other book that you just mentioned, how you accidentally became a stock photo or something. Was that something that actually happened? Would you be able to tell us?
Yeah, so my second book is a book of essays about how all these strange things have happened in my life. The same as Shubhangi, actually. She also has many strange things that has happened in her life. But the title of that story is called How I Accidentally Became a Global Stock Photo, which is a few years ago, a friend in Canada told me that they saw me in an advert in the newspaper in Canada, and I said, and it was to invite immigrants into the country, and I knew it was me from the photo, but I said, what am I doing in the newspaper in Canada? And another friend told me, this looks like a photo we did many years ago at university, and there had been a photographer who had come in, and he was a kind of well-known photographer, and he said he was doing an art project, and it was about 100 of us that day, students, and we signed a document. Now I thought we were signing to let him use this photo for his art project, and he was never clear. So when I reverse Googled this image, I was in McDonald's adverts in Singapore, in China, I was in India advertising for makeup, and the thing is I gave them the right to change my photo. So they would put acne on my skin and they change my name and say, my name is Anne and I tried this this product and it cleared my acne after my pregnancy and now my skin is so clear. And selling condos in Florida, it was crazy. Like there was, in Mumbai there were highways with me selling insurance, and the thing is I didn't know any of this. So I tweeted about it in the time when Twitter was still alive, and I said, you know, this crazy thing happened and I have no right. I contacted the photographer. He said, you have no right over this. He's making all this money off this photo. I didn't even know I was in all these adverts. He sold it in a lot of places. And so the story became very big. Like CNN did an interview, BBC did an interview, Monica Lewinsky got involved and retweeted and was talking about how young people are exploited today. And it just became this crazy viral story about how I had lost the photo. And I know it has happened to other people, but in this case it was legal. Like I legally couldn't take up, and it was scary also because they changed my name. And so I think that particular photo, you can't see what ethnicity I am. So they were using it in South America and in Thailand and in the Arab countries, and the photo just went crazy. And so I said, to get some money back out of the story that I had no say over, and thankfully, thank God, it wasn't really terrible situations I found myself in, although there was some dating websites saying I'm waiting for my knight in shining armor to come save me. And then I also wonder who is coming, who is meeting these people on these dating websites. When the time comes, who is going to meet these people? I'm even on some child caring websites. So who is going to care for your child if I am the picture there as the person who's going to care for your child? Anyway, so I said at least I will get this essay in this book of stories. So buy the book of stories. So at least I will make something out of the story and tell you the crazy story of how I lost this photo completely.
You know, that's also so telling of the process of writing, right? We take these experiences that may not be comfortable, may not fit into our life, may have no other real value in anything, but then you turn it into a story and you feel like, yeah, you know, I turned it into something.
I mean, I also got to tell my side of the story because there was a lot of comments online, people saying, look at this writer, she's so stupid, she doesn't see what she signs. Isn't the job of a writer to read what she's signing? Like if she's signing a contract, why wouldn't she read it? And oh my God, she just wants to promote her book. That's why she's doing this. I didn't even have a book at the time to promote. So I felt like I was also telling my side of the story. Like, you know, it wasn't as stupid and as simple as that. So I also felt like I got to have my say.
Yeah. I have a very generic question, since both of you are women writers, so to speak.
that are you conscious of your gender in your writing, or does gender play a role in terms of your plot or how you go about constructing your tales? I mean, somewhere, Shubhangi is acknowledging her mother and, perhaps the grandmother's oral storytelling traditions. But in the 21st century, does gender play a role in the publishing industry?
There is nothing devoid of gender for me. I don't know, it shapes the way I look at the world, it shapes my writing, it shapes the choices I make, it shapes the way the publisher views me, it shapes the way the photograph they will use, the way they'll describe the book. It's so many layers, I just don't know. I can't think of one thing where it doesn't come into play, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, the same. And also my writing will always, I always say, even if I'm writing a male character, somehow there's always a female character inside that male character trying to get out. Because I have 3 older sisters, my mother has 7 sisters, my life is surrounded by this female view. Inevitably, it will always be in my writing somehow. And I don't know, if you view the world from a female's point of view, it just colors everything.
I think I'm rescuing my male characters, as a female author. I give them the freedom to actually feel an emotion, to maybe shed a tear, to think about what are they thinking. These little things that shape our experience. Yeah, which is more than the color of curtains or some rubbish like that, I felt like when I started out, I'm still starting out, there's a big bias. My book has it touches it has the politics of the earth in it, but it was being called magical realism or so emotional, and I was like, why is it that you can't acknowledge the politics behind this, which somehow is associated with male writers, and it comes through in the blurb and everything, so I had a say in all of it. And right to the point in Europe where some people thought Swaroop was a male writer, because I just tried to take away the descriptions and even honestly, it's a exercise I do for myself, by reading the blurb can I make out, because the way a blurb is written for a female writer sometimes I feel is different from the way it's written for a male writer. Yeah.
How do you know when you're ready to publish?
Oh. Do you know?
I mean, when I thought I was ready to publish, clearly I wasn't, because 3-4 years later only the manuscript was ready, and I thought the manuscript was ready, so I didn't know.
I will interpret your question as 2 things. When are you ready to send it off into the world? Is that the question? Or when are you ready to let go?
When are you ready to let it out into the world?
As in send it to people?
Yes.
I have been told that time and again by agents and publishers that the time when you think you're completely ready, you need to do 2-3 drafts after that. Because when a writer thinks they're ready and even the agent or the publisher thinks they're ready, there are 2-3 drafts in between. So that's the time you actually stop writing, give it 3 months, come back with an objective, detoxed brain and look at it and then go for it again. Because all we get is one chance, they will read our book and make a decision. So we have to be very, very sure. Yeah. And letting go is an emotional, spiritual process when you put it out in the world and make your peace with the perfections and imperfections and bless it.
Can I also add the story that you're talking about publishing? Because I think also people are interested in the process of publishing.
Yeah.
And when I thought this book was ready to send off, I was sending it off and it was just getting rejections, and I couldn't see that the beginning of the book was just too slow. It wasn't getting to the point, and that was the main thing.
Okay.
But to say that I think it's similar here in India as it is in South Africa with the publishing scene, which is that it's very local and agents are not a big part of the culture. And I think it's coming up here in India, but in South Africa there's no agent culture. And the agent is the person who will basically speak on your behalf and try to get you the best book deal that you can get. And in South Africa, even for Africa, agents don't give us the time of day. They're not interested in our stories. It's mainly, UK and US that they're interested in. It's very hard to get an agent. In India, it's changing, I think, but
Yeah.
it's really hard to get an agent. Like, I was applying to so many agents. I don't even know if they read my emails, and I realized I had to go there. It was a matter of being there and being able to speak to someone face to face. And this was after I published my first novel. I had a novel with Penguin South Africa, and I still couldn't get this novel published or get an agent. And I went to the US. I heard about a residency. I went to the US, and I remember trying to get funding because I was freelancing at the time. I had savings, but I didn't want to touch my savings. And I remember approaching my city, approaching a company and telling them I've got this quite a prestigious residency in the US. It will change my career. I'm only one of your last few authors left in Durban. There's not many authors here. It will change my life if I go there. Please, can you help me fund the trip to get to America? They will give me the accommodation, but I just need the flight. And nobody wanted to give me the money. And I remember telling myself, I'm going to invest in my future. This is me now taking my career seriously, like the same way I was reading so many books. And I remember thinking, it's okay, you pay for the ticket, this is an investment in your future. I went to the US, and I was the only author from outside of the US there, because nobody was going to apply for something where they have to now fly and to get there, and it would have been difficult for them. But I remember telling myself, you just need a chance with an agent. The day came when we had to present, and I was presenting this novel to the agent. The day came, and we all had to queue up. The agent was on a screen in New York. We were in New Mexico, and we had to give the great elevator pitch, the great American elevator pitch, which is this is not something I do.
Yeah.
And there was so much pressure. I remember perspiring, and there was so much pressure on me in this moment to just give the blurb, give the great pitch, the American agent. And when the time came, I looked at the agent on the screen, and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. And I walked away. Because there was so much pressure on me. I'd flown from South Africa. I'd paid for this ticket. I had come here. I was the only one who was not American. I couldn't do it. The words would not come out of my mouth. And I went in the corner and I started crying. Because this was my one opportunity. I came and I messed up for this novel. And I always think how things work, because I was crying and the other authors were comforting me, and they were like, it's okay. And I was like, I'm going back to South Africa. I've messed up my opportunity. Why couldn't I just give her 2 words or 5 words or something, And that same day part of the residency was we had to speak to a mentor and tell her about what we're writing. But I kept crying in this conversation with her. I kept bursting out crying, and I kept saying, I'm so sorry, this is so stupid. And she said, what happened? And I said, no, I was supposed to pitch to the agent my novel. And she told me basically, like, maybe I can help you, because she had heard me read from my novel the night before. And at the point where you're doing everything for yourself so much, you don't think anyone can help you at that point. So I didn't even hear what she said. And the next day, and I was like really at my lowest of my lows, I was like, this ended my career now. That was how it felt at the moment. My career is ended now, finished.
Yeah.
I woke up in my email, there were 3 emails from agents in New York saying,
wow.
In my inbox, they were rejecting me. These ones approached me and they said, so-and-so mentioned you. She said, you have a great book. Please, can you send it to us? Can you imagine? I went from my lowest, and really,
that's
truly,
also the sisterhood,
and it's truly the generosity of people, but also getting yourself into that position to get those opportunities. And you really taught me you have to bet on yourself. And I remember making that statement about this is an investment in my future. When we finally sold, as I got an agent and we sold the novel. When we finally sold the novel, we sold it, and as a South African living in Durban, this is almost impossible. I sold it at auction in America to one of the biggest publishing houses. I made back, 20, 30 times back that investment I made for that flight to America. And it's a reminder to everyone here, like, you have to bet on yourself and believe in yourself. Even if you fail, the opportunities will come in ways you won't imagine.
I agree with you. I mean, I have a similar story. In India, I was shortlisted for all the big prizes, and I had the privilege of a British agent who told me that I should self-publish in UK because I'm not getting anywhere abroad, and I thought, no, I think I can do better than that. You know, it's been received well in India, and in India also. First, I had a lot of publishers tell me we will only publish 1/4 of your book, the other 3/4 we will not, and I had conceived it in a certain way, so I was very keen that we publish the whole thing together. Somehow I had someone believe in the same vision that I had. It got published, and basically I then decided not to go with my British agent, which now in India that is like saying no to, you know, your boss or something. We look up to UK like it's hallowed. If you have a British agent, even if they may be the worst, you know, it's oh my god, what are you doing? And at that point I realized that the agents work like a taxi mafia of Goa in Britain. You know, if you sorry, it's time out, but basically, you know, if you say no to one, then the others will say screw you, you've rejected us, you think you're too big for your boots. So that happened. I was universally rejected. Luckily I found a Spanish agent who took my book to the US, where this lady hadn't even applied because she didn't think I was even worth, you know, going to the US with. Again, within 3 days I had an auction. Yeah, so amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing how similar.
Shabnam and Shubhank, I think your talk has been inspiring, but the fact that you are willing to share with us your vulnerabilities and being so candid, I think that's what's really heartwarming about this session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. We'll be back in 2 minutes for the next session, so please don't go away.
Thank you for staying. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Should I?
We should hold your book.
No,
I have your book too.
It's fine. You. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure.
Let me see. This is.
This I'm using because it has only 4.
Oh yeah.
This is the only device has 4. The other DJ has 4.
Okay. It costs you how much? One of these?
This is around 19 or 18.
Each one of them?
No, total.
No, the set.
Full package, yeah.
Set of 5?
Set of 4. Set of 4 and a receiver. Yes.